What's the future?
And we are hopefully live.
Hello, can everybody hear us out there? Please let us know if you can hear us. This is the RPG Pundit, and I'm here tonight on Inappropriate Characters with my usual co-host, Venture Satanis and Joe Bittman, but also with a very special last-minute guest star, James Raggi IV, aka Big Jim from Lamentations of the Flame Princess, an OSR legend. You could probably say that the OSR wouldn't look the way it looks today if it hadn't been for Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So we're very happy to have him here.
Respect.
And yeah, James, we're glad you could come on. It was a bit of a last-minute surprise, but we tried to spread the word in the last half hour or so. And we hope you're going to have a good time here.
Well, I hope so too. It's 3:30 in the morning here, so be interesting.
Awesome. The sleep deprivation will make your tongue more loose.
You'll definitely have a good time, but the hangover is going to be a bitch when all those little woke people come nipping at your heels in the morning for being on a show with histophobes.
That's right. So James, most of the people that are watching now and that are going to be watching as the show carries on, we're building up viewers here, are probably familiar with you and your work. But if you want to, feel free, just in case we've got some total noob on board that doesn't know, what would you like to tell the audience about you and what you do in the RPG hobby?
Okay. I manage, run, own, publish Lamentations of the Flame Princess. It's a heavy metal horror movie inspired weird fantasy role-playing game. It's OSR-based rules, and yeah, I didn't come on here specifically to be all promotion and everything, so I didn't have my I didn't have my banter down pat, but yeah, that's basically what I do. I'm sitting here in Helsinki, Finland, and we've been publishing since 2009, so we've made a good go of it so far. Hopefully another 12 years in it. But yeah, basically try to be uncensored and crazy and hopefully good while we're doing that. And yeah. Worst sales pitch ever, but that's basically it.
That's all right. You got a lot of people, a lot of fans here in the chat already. All of you who are in the chat, if you're watching right now and you're able to share on your social media, feel free to let people on your social media know that right now Inappropriate Characters is live and we have the creator of Lamentations of the Flame Princess with us.
Hey, we're going to force him to run an adventure for us. Right now,
we're not. Venture's always trying to get us to play. That's not what we do on the show, Venture. Come on. So, Jim, if I'm not mistaken, you are part of a relatively elite group of people that makes a full-time living off RPGs, or am I wrong? Do you have another job, or is Lamentations your whole deal? Right. So you and me are pretty rare in this hobby. We're both people who basically live off writing RPGs. Did you ever think you'd get to this point?
Did
you have this plan from the start?
I did have this plan from the start, because the story of the formation of the company is that I got a government grant that's designed to help foreigners start businesses. And I knew at least 6 or 9 months with the extension that I'd be able to be full-time doing RPGs, and I thought I was ripping off the Finnish government. It's like, oh my God, they're gonna subsidize me to be a role-playing publisher, like that's a real business. Oh, these morons. And I just thought I'd be able to just have some fun for, half a year, 3/4 of a year. And then all the sons of bitches out there actually started liking what I was doing. And it was encouraging. And it was like, oh, well, let's try this. Oh, they like that too. Let's try this. Oh, that's selling more. And suddenly everyone ruined my grand scheme by actually making this an actual, real, viable business. And it was just like,
Do you think it was the aspect of not planning to fail, but assuming that you probably wouldn't be successful? So do you think that gave you extra impetus to just do whatever because there was almost no chance of like huge mainstream success?
I don't think so, because the first year I was just doing adventures, and nobody in the industry, including retail or anything, gave a crap about old school adventures that didn't have its own rule set attached to it. So, I made the rule set. The first was the deluxe box, and that sold out really quick. And it was at that point that I realized this could be a going concern. And that's when I really went in for the explicit material in the Grindhouse box, because I had the art that's still in the hardcover rule book now. Using the Cannibal Corpse artist and nudity and gore and everything, I decided, okay, if this is going to be a real business, if I'm going to make a go of it, it's got to be the stuff I really want to do, because if it makes no sense to do this job as unstable and insecure as role-playing publishing is, and especially how I'm not a very good businessman. That's I just fell into that. If I'm doing stuff for the public instead of something that I really like, I might as well just get a normal job, because it'll be just as miserable. And at least with a normal job, there's stability to it.
So you actually did it the other way around. You started off making milder products, and then when you realized you were making money, you said, well, screw it, I'm just going to be as much my own thing as possible, and see if it keeps making money.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's great.
Yeah, and I kept pushing it. I thought Grindhouse was going to be the end of it. People are going to look at this and reject it. And they didn't. And so as the next year I did Death, Love, Doom, which is still probably just the nastiest thing we've put out. And it's like, okay, this is going to be the end. And people went for that. And it's like, okay, I think it was the next year. It's like, okay, well, let's go fuck for Satan. Let's see just something that's no problem. And it's like, oh, okay. And yeah, there have been issues along the way. Almost all the free RPG Day stuff that I put out, Better Than Any Man. I remember
great adventure, by the way. That one, that was fantastic.
But on the day there were stories of people going to the store, and the people running the store had thrown them out, so they went behind the back and fished them out of the dumpster. And so, yeah, because even for the stuff for free RPG Day, it was like, okay, no compromise, no holding back. It's going to be the full thing. And eventually we were doing hardcover books for free RPG Day. I mean, Better Than Any Man was just so much more than everyone else was doing. And, Doom Cave was more standard for the free RPG Day format, and Slugs, but Vaginas Are Magic and Eldritch Cock. I mean, that is ridiculous stuff to lead with as promotional material to a general audience. But it's just like, okay, anyone that this appeals to isn't going to give me shit when they, come in as a fan. And that's kind of, I mean, that's important. And So it's really weird when somebody that's in the fold gets pissed off at something I'm doing, because it's like, if you've not been paying attention for the last 5, 6, 10 years now, it's like that's.
Okay.
I mean, if the public is pissed, that's not a problem for me. It's when I'm working with someone and I get that nasty email, that's when I start freaking out.
All right, James, there's something I always wanted to ask you. So I've got the Grindhouse edition right here. How many years? And I always wondered, I never asked you about this, but is this cover, is that a Bohemian Grove reference?
Oh God, that's so long ago now. I know that wouldn't have come from me. I don't know if Mullen did that on his own as a Bohemian Grove reference, but no, I don't. Unless I've really forgotten shit, I think I would remember that. But that Bohemian Grove, if that is a reference, it didn't come from me.
So I want to know more about the kind of the history of your work and some of the controversies and what have you. But I think I have to ask from a business point of view about your latest series of books. You've just put out, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you've just put out 10 books all at once. And I'm just wondering, from just a purely business perspective, what led you to do that instead of, say, releasing a book every 2 months for, 20 months?
Oh, that's easy. Originally, this release cycle was supposed to happen October 2020. It was supposed to be Terror in the Streets and Book of Antithesis. I thought both would be ready, and it would be those 2 books. That would just be a few months after the previous releases. And Book of Antithesis wasn't ready. And so...
Not my fault.
So we had the idea, Kelvin, the person that did Terror in the Streets, I had the brilliant idea of saying, hey, while we're waiting for Antithesis, let's make like a deluxe box version of this. So he made another book for a box and cardboard minis, cardboard hero style minis. But as we're waiting for Book of Antithesis, all these other projects just started landing in my lap, stuff that had been out there for a while. A couple things that people just gave to me. It's like, hey, I just finished this. Would you be interested in this? And I'm like, oh, okay. And suddenly I had this great big pile of shit to release. And because I'm up here in Finland, and because the direct orders are basically the lifeblood, sales through retail outlets give a fraction of the money as a direct order does. So direct orders are important, but because I'm in Finland and very, very, very few of my customers are in Finland, it's all international shipping. And that's a great big barrier pain in the ass.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was just a matter of, if I release it all at once, the shipping cost is going to be less.
That's what I said.
Just buying it all at once than than adding up the shipping cost for, say, dividing it up between, over 6 months. And you're
I don't know if it was here when people were like asking aloud or somewhere else on social media, but that's what I said to whoever was listening at the time or responding to. That's probably why he put out multiple books at the exact same time to lessen the god-awful shipping charges. People can bulk books together and then make it cheaper, basically.
Well, congratulations, Jim. You're following the Venture Satanist School of Economics there.
Yeah, well, if I had released... Well, I didn't have the current shipping deals. I got new shipping contracts with different carriers this past summer. But if I'd released 2 books, it would have been about 29 euros shipping to the U.S. for the 2 books. All the 10 books to the U.S., I think the cheapest shipping on that is 41 euros. So
that's a big difference.
Well, that's another 12 euros for everything. Whereas if I had released them in, 2 books a month for 4 months, because 2 of the things are freebies, then that would have been 29 4 times. And there would have been some people that, knowing that the new stuff is coming, would just wait anyway so they can get the combined shipping. And so it's like, okay, but releasing them all at once means it's a big fucking chunk of change to get them all. So it's just like, okay, I have no idea which is actually best, but if I release them all at once, at least they all exist, because there's there's the potential problem if I don't have I don't have this big war chest. There aren't big margins. I mean, this stuff has to sell fairly quickly for me to keep the machine going. And there's the danger if I'd released 2 with the idea that all these other ones that are finished are waiting for release. Well, what if those 2 just flop horribly? And then I've got all these other things waiting to release, and I don't have the resources to then release them. At least this way, if I fail and it falls flat in its ass and I go bankrupt, at least they're out in the world and they exist. So, yeah.
And do you have any idea how it's early days still from when you released them, but how it's going?
Yeah. Well, the sales of the new things last year were a bit better, but then I was doing the whole big save the company thing. Holy shit. So, I guess that's to be expected. And last year I was able to get the printer to not bill me until the US shipment, arrived. So I was able to sell from the US web store at the same time as the EU web store. That's not the case this time. So maybe when the stuff shows up in the US, which should be in February, and I'm able to sell direct from the US warehouse, then, maybe hopefully there'll be another big batch of orders. And at that point, it'll start going into retail. But everything's looking good so far. Nothing has fallen flat on its ass. So that's good.
So we should mention to our audience, for the purpose of transparency, that one of the hosts of Inappropriate Characters has an economic connection to Lamentations. James published Joe Bittman's book, The Book of Antitheses. And I guess the question I have to ask you there is, what the hell were you thinking, James, really?
I was just thinking that, oh my goodness, this looks insane. I have no idea what it is. I have no idea what to make of it. I have to publish it just to find out what happens. Because I really didn't understand what the hell Job was doing until the layout was done, until the art started coming in. And then it was just like, oh, that's what he's doing. That I can get my head around it, even though it still makes no sense to me, really. But
that's okay. You're not alone there.
Yeah, but it was just the sort of thing that, it's he has this grand idea that's just crazy, and I've never seen another book like it. And then he told me, "Oh yeah, I got this artist that he'll work on it. Grammy nominated guy." It's like, okay, how can I turn that down? And so it's. Yeah, but it seems to be the big thing of this release cycle. So it's very surprising to me how much of my current fans are actually into occult stuff for real, and I'm not. So it's been interesting.
A lot of game designers are into occult stuff. So I all the time, and I mean, the book is geared towards a game master anyway. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
I mean, I probably don't have any serious doubts in saying that out of people that are kind of known in RPG publishing, I'm the foremost expert on the occult. I mean, I've studied it academically, I've written about it, I've practiced it for decades, right? And I don't really get what Job's writing there either. He comes from the tradition of chaos magicians who like to publish. Every chaos magician wants to outdo the weirdness of what they're trying to make compared to whatever has come before. And I think Job has succeeded there. So I wouldn't be surprised if if word of this book gets out in the broader community of chaos magicians, that you could get purchases of this book from people who don't role play at all, because just they'll see it as a chaos magic grimoire that they can show off, So you might get some extra sales from that.
Yeah, Joe, what was that occult podcast you were just on?
Thoth Hermes.
Yeah, because when that interview came out, there was, not a lot, but there were, a noticeable little bump when that came out. So yeah. So people are beginning to notice. I just wonder what a person is going to think if they see it in the game store, and it's a quite striking book. One of the better looking books we've ever done, I think. They're going to pick it up, start paging through it. What is the person on the street going to think, or the average game store dweller going to think? I that's what I'm waiting for, because the people that my fans, the ready customer base for this stuff, they're not going to freak out over this shit I do. Certainly not this book. I wasn't so worried about, but when it starts hitting the wider world, with this group of releases, when I put in the solicitations for the retail distribution, I was expecting all sorts of hell just from that. Not just from this book, and nothing. It's like no one said anything. It's like, okay, that's weird. But I'm still in the embattled 80s mindset of the world thinks this stuff is weird, and Satanism is going to make people upset and blah, 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 when that's just such a gut thing where it's other things that people get pissed off about now. So.
Yeah. Well, you've had going back to your history, I think you've had a very long history of being attacked by the woke scolds in the RPG industry, and, cancel culture people and whatever else you want to call them, that have been, resoundingly. You're right up there with me and Venger, at least, as being regular targets of these neo-Puritans, and most of them coming from the left.
This one was the target this time.
Which one is that?
Alex's book, White Power. That's WIGHT, to make that clear.
There you go.
Well, if you see it in writing, it's like, okay, you can see that there's something different going on there. But if you're just saying it, then much easier to misinterpret.
That's fantastic. Well, in my Last Sun setting book, there's a zombie kingdom, and one of the problems the zombie kingdom has is that there's a faction. There's all kinds. It's a kingdom ruled by all kinds of undead, and there's a faction of whites who are white supremacists. As in they believe the whites should be in charge and not the zombies. So I think I did that little pun before you guys did, but in any case, yeah, I can see how that would be. Putting it on the cover would definitely be something that will draw the attention of the SJW crowd.
James, what release have you? What's the release that you think you've gotten the most flack over?
Zach has nothing to do with this book. That's easy.
And Zach S. actually had nothing to do with the book, right?
He had nothing. He had no idea. He was not consulted. He was not told. He had no idea that the book existed until it was already out and people were talking about it on social media.
What's your relationship with Zach like now? He's always hanging out in the Discord, so...
Yeah,
you have a good relationship, or what's it like now?
I haven't had a real conversation with him for about a year and a half now. We went back and forth in the comments to one of my Facebook posts a few months back, but he hangs around the LOTFP Facebook group, and
he's probably still waiting for the reunion tour in about 5 years.
Yeah, but I don't, and then the royalties for the books that are still in print. I send him an email once a quarter. Here's the statement, and he says, "Okay, fine," and I send him his money, and that's about it. Yeah.
Well, I've been on record a few times in saying that the stuff that you make is really good, but you've kind of over the years made some bad choices about who your friends have been, because there's been more than one of them that has turned around and denounced you when put under pressure by the SJWs. Do you think you've learned any lessons from that?
Absolutely not. No. If somebody comes to me with what I think is a good idea, I don't give a shit. It's like, okay. I just hope we get the book out before they turn on me, so the cool thing exists. Because if the cool thing exists and then they get pissed off at me, it's like, okay, that sucks. That's a pain in the ass, but the thing exists out in the world for people to have, and that's the important thing. The politics and morality of who's good and who's bad, and you're friends with that person, you went on that podcast. I really don't give a shit. Shit gets to me sometimes, but in the ideal placid conception of my place in the world, it's like I don't care who you are. Is there something cool we can do together? That's my priority.
Well, that's spoken like a true capitalist, to be sure.
Well, he also values the work, and I think that's commendable, because sometimes I feel the same way. It's like, if I'm going to go on vacation and I know that there's a small chance, however small, I may not make it. I will send like the raw manuscript of what I've been working on for like the last 6 months to a friend or something like that, just in case I die. I don't want all the work that I've been doing, my passion, to die with me. Like, if something happens to me and I die, or I'm incapacitated or something like that, here's my work, like, make sure it gets out there. Because at the end of the day, for artists like James and myself, and I'm sure Job and Pundit, it's about the work and getting it out there. It's like your children, I think. You want your babies to go out there and live. And if the relationship that spawned those children goes bad, sours, dies, well, at least you still have those children. I mean, they're the important thing. And as long as they exist, that's not nothing. That's really everything.
Yeah.
And
I just want to say, you're talking about the SJWs and the wokesters. The problem with them is not that they exist, not that they want products to be a certain way. The only problem with them is the power they seem to have to prevent the things they don't like. I don't consider them my enemy as far as that I must smash them and make them go away. They're my enemy in the sense that they give me shit and make it more difficult to do what I want to do. The victory is not vanquishing them. The victory is removing their ability to affect what I do. They can do what they do and promote their shit and make all their shit for the people that like that. All they want, more power to them, even if they're 10 times more popular than I am. Just leave me alone to do my stuff for the people that want my stuff, and then you can be what the fuck ever. So,
well, I can't disagree with that, but the problem is that fundamentally their ideology is an ideology that is totalitarian. They demand not just that they get to make their products, that they get to push their ideological agenda or something, but that anything that doesn't agree with them has to be destroyed, right? And that's not something you can really divorce from the rest of their ideology, right? I mean, I don't put a political litmus test. Right? I'm not saying, well, I'm not going to be friends with a liberal or something. I'm not going to work with a liberal. I mean, I was friends with Venger back when he was still a Hillary supporter. So this is I'm never going to let him live it down either. But that wasn't the problem. And you know why it wasn't a problem is because I know that Venger was also a stalwart defender of freedom of speech. Which also you, Jim, have been throughout your career, and that's something that I consider very admirable. Whereas some other people, including Zach, have not been like that. They've been stalwart defenders of their freedom of speech, but not necessarily of other people that they politically disagree with having that same freedom of speech.
Yeah, but then. I mean, you've especially, you seem to be, you seem to be wanting to take the fight to them and to make a big deal about the fight, not.
You have to. You have to, because otherwise all you're doing is fighting a defensive war of attrition, right? If they had the power to do it, all four of us would be in a gulag right now. They just don't have the power to do that, right? It's not that they lack the desire to do it. They would like us to not exist. So when you're dealing with that means that you have to fight aggressively against the mentality that leads to that kind of totalitarian thinking.
So yeah, but what's your end game? I mean, my way of fighting is making shit that for example, Alex's book White Power, WIGHT. When Alex offered that to me, it's like I knew certain people were just going to hit the fucking roof. I was worried everyone was going to hit the fucking roof. I was expecting as soon as, that title was revealed, I'd be getting those emails. Oh, I can't work with you anymore. And that hasn't happened as of yet. But that's my fighting. My resistance is mainly doing it through the work. What's your end game? I mean, what do you think your end game is if you win?
Well, the ultimate.
He would just retire on his little farm and just look at the sunset.
That's right. I'd be like Cincinnatus, of old. I'd go back to I'd just go back to making my products and not worrying about it, right? But yeah, I mean, the ultimate end game is that this is a fight that is a bigger part of a fight for the soul of Western civilization, right? So in the big picture, the question is, do we still believe in the classical Enlightenment liberal values that made Western civilization great, or do we want to take a turn towards a civilization where a tiny, not particularly competent elite get to decide what we watch and what we play and what we read and what we eat and where we live and all of those sorts of things? I see it as a part of a bigger conflict for the soul of Western civilization that we're fighting right now.
And your front on that is the tabletop gaming community.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It's a small field of battle, but it's a very important one because politics is downstream from culture. The other side recognize that. Why do you think they're engaging in this entryism in every aspect of pop culture, right? Because if they can transform every aspect, movies, television, comic books, video games, role-playing games, into nothing more than strictly controlled vehicles for their ideological propaganda, then they're going to be able to, if they control the narrative, they control the minds of an entire generation of people, right? And you can't let that happen.
Yeah, this is exactly the battleground you want, young kids that are getting into this stuff.
I seem to have silenced the room here. I'll comment on the live chat.
No, I was with you, pundit. I follow you.
If you guys have questions for James or
wait, before we turn it over to the floor, I just want to put James on the hot seat one last time.
All right.
Mr. Raggi, are you ready now to denounce Jordan B. Peterson?
No!
No, I am not ready to announce Jordan B. Peterson.
What are your feelings on Jordan B. Peterson at this juncture in time?
I've been enjoying the podcast he's been doing over the past year with people like Stephen Fry and Russell Howard and who else did he get on there? Matthew McConaughey and
Ben Shapiro.
I don't give a shit about Ben Shapiro. I'm just thinking, he was on with Russell Peters as well. I'm thinking of like mainstream celebrities that he's had contact, that apparently people don't think have cooties for, associating with him. And it's just, I'm very comfortable not denouncing someone that Stephen Fry has made multiple appearances alongside,
Sure.
Okay.
I quite like what Peterson is doing now, but I kind of wish he'd go back to talking about, his biblical lectures, and when he talks about myths and fairy tales and things like that. That's his most excellent work. Maps of Meaning is still his best book, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, of course, I'm sort of a bit of an intellectual, so maybe that's what I like. And it's also maybe I shouldn't be.
They're shooting
promoting that because or trying to encourage him to do that, because right now I'm doing a lot of my videos end up talking about the power of myth and stuff like that when it's turning out really well for me, and if he starts doing it again, I'll just be a second fiddle to him. We went to the same university.
Yeah, I think he's doing like a video series on Maps of Meaning because he's shown some pictures of production. I think his daughter is going to be presenting, or I don't know. She was in the pictures of the production still, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean that sort of stuff. It's I mean he's interesting, but there's so much stuff that he said, like his whole religious angle. I'm just not into it. It's he's more interesting talking to other people. Like he just this weekend, he released a new podcast with Lawrence Krauss, and they were getting into some of the same stuff that Peterson and Sam Harris had gotten into a few years ago, except the conversation was actually pushing forward instead of them just locking horns on the definition of what did they get caught up on? The definition of truth, where Harris and Peterson spent 2 hours not being able to agree on a basic definition of what truth is. And so it's so the Jungian clinical psychologist and researcher talking to the physicist was very interesting to me, and it wasn't political as far as that part of the conversation goes. And trying to figure out like what is reality. And that stuff fascinates me. And it's, that if people don't like Peterson, that's fine. You don't have to listen to someone you do like. It's fine. Just
some comments from the chat here. Judd Goswick says, I found the work of Jordan B. Peterson because of the Lamentations kerfuffle, and it's done me worlds of good.
Okay. Well, that's
Aaron
an
the
odd way to
Pedantic
have
says,
thought about it.
Aaron the Pedantic says, I don't care about Ben Shapiro. Based. I don't think that's exactly how James intended it to go, but
well, Ben Shapiro is a partisan political figure, and those sorts of people are just not very interesting to me. He
just talks too fast to me. It's like I'm watching an episode of Gilmore Girls. So.
Well, there's a reason why he does that. Ben Shapiro was trained in the Harvard style of debate, right? That school of debating. As someone who's done some debating, I'm kind of familiar with it, and it's very much the most aggressive school of debating there is. It's based on just overwhelming your opponent and using kind of logical tricks to tear the argument to pieces. And you have to admire, he's a master at it. I think he's won contests and things like that when he was a student, right? If I remember correctly, but he's really, really good at that. it's kind of a, that's his one trick, right? Like I agree with most of the stuff that he says most of the time, and I think he's an interesting guy in some ways because within, there's a wide, for those of you who aren't conservative here, there's a wide spectrum of conservatism that encompasses a lot of different points of view, and Shapiro has an interesting place kind of in the middle of it because he's not. He wasn't, for example, a Trumpian nationalist from the start. He was actually quite critical of Trump at the beginning, and then later he kind of changed some of his perspective because he realized that what he actually did as president was better than what Shapiro thought he would do. So he's a guy that shows the ability to evolve from a certain position, and that's interesting. But he's definitely not the most exciting of conservative thinkers. He's a great debater, but he's not one of the great thinkers of the right, as far as I'm concerned. Funny how we've gone from talking about RPGs to talking about Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro, I was like, what the fuck? Next topic.
Calvinoni says Peterson has problems and his religious views pollute his advanced psychology stuff. Well, this is very funny because people who haven't read Peterson carefully tend to think that Peterson is like extremely religious. Peterson can't even, say he's a Christian, like he's not, he doesn't look at this he doesn't look at psychology from the point of view of religion. He's looking at religion from the point of view of psychology. He's not, he's got, in spite of the fact that his commentaries on things like Genesis are some of the most interesting and amazing kind of commentaries that you can listen to. They're fundamentally secular. He's never talking about the importance of God for its own sake or something like that. He's talking about what it does in the context of society and the human experience. So that's actually part of what makes him interesting to me.
Yeah, well, the biblical series on Genesis that he did, I mean, that was specific. That was like explicitly part of the program that he wasn't going to be talking about the supernatural or metaphysics.
Yeah.
He was looking at the book of Genesis psychologically. And
he was
I found that
it as a psychological take on myth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because when it comes to religion or the Bible, if you take the Bible as a work by people, then you can take parts, you can then really decide, oh, that part's shit, oh, that part's not relevant anymore, but this bit's good, and you can engage with it that way because you can recognize it's something that was done by people that have various degrees of success in creating universal wisdom. Whereas if you're engaging with it as a supernatural work, I don't see how you do that.
It forces you to have a completely different perspective. Yeah. But I think the interesting thing, speaking as someone who did comparative religion, as when it comes to that kind of other, the non-religious analysis of holy books, isn't really just to pick and choose a grab bag and say, well, this is good and this is not good. It's to say, well, why is this in here, right? Like, what is it about? What is it really trying to say? Which may or may not be relevant at this moment in the modern age, right? But it's to say, what is important about it, and why was it, why was it kept in this book that is actually a collection of texts, so put together over more than 1,000 years. But anyways, let's getting back to gaming here. Somebody had a question way far back up there, and I don't remember who it was. I think it might have been Adino, but I'm not sure. Who said, do you think that social media, I'm paraphrasing because I can't find the question, but he said basically, do you think that social media has been a net positive or negative for tabletop RPGs? And I know what I would say to that, but I'm curious to see what our guest would say about that. James?
Oh boy. It's hard to say. I've often said, I wish I had come of age in the 70s instead of being born in the 70s. That way I could have been releasing my game, in the 80s and really would have cleaned up. And this would have been much better doing it the old-fashioned way without, all the email and all that stuff. But from my point of view now, it's like, how do you function? How do you let people know anything? How does this work without social media? I mean, maybe the magazines and everything would still be in existence, but there were never that many of them. I mean, how would I be getting the word out about Lamentations? I would have to be doing, conventions, but then what? Taking out the quarter-page ad and dragon every month? Yeah. So I think social media is a net positive, but you have to be really selective with how you engage, or it's going to drive you insane.
I think that without two elements, one of which is social media and the other one is print on demand, the indie publishing scene as it is today couldn't possibly exist, right? So it's certainly been this part of the formula of my success, and you could have in the old days, maybe if you'd invested a large amount of money, have just started your own RPG publishing firm. But, there were lots and lots of companies that did RPGs in the 80s and 90s, and almost all of them ended up going broke. Or you could have chosen to try to write for one of the big existing companies like TSR or Palladium or Steve Jackson Games or what have you, but then you would have been able to publish whatever you like. I don't think Fuck for Satan or for that matter, probably Dark Albion would never have been published. To say nothing of the Invisible College or the Book of Antitheses.
Well, at least not through standard game channels. I mean, it would have been bounced out of Gen
it could have come out as some kind of little pamphlet book or something that would have been sold in small press. But it's I think that social media has allowed the creation of subcultures, right? The OSR wouldn't be a coherent subculture in gaming if it wasn't for social media. And of course, we all have big problems with social media, but it's kind of necessary.
Well, what are you including as social media? Do you include message boards as social media?
Well, I guess those were that's the primitive form of social media,
okay.
Sure.
Yeah, because I was about to say the OSR existed before social media as we know it now existed. I mean, that was started on the message boards, and things like Facebook and Twitter didn't exist yet.
Yeah, no, that's true. It did. It did exist in the form of forum posts, and maybe it would. In some ways, the one thing that is kind of a problem is that social media has allowed a few corporations to suck all the air out of any other space, and make it that now you have to maneuver through these corporations, which are also often hostile to people that are presenting stuff that certain people object to, and manage to somehow still promote your products through that venue instead of the old days where you could have just started your own RPG forum and get an audience from there.
Well, you could still do that, but I mean, I some of the decisions that the big social media companies don't make any sense to me, but it's still it's still an option. You can navigate that maze, and it's still there. I mean, before the internet, I mean, even before the message boards and everything, I mean, everything was a lot harder to let anybody know anything. It's not like all these dissident voices had readier access to the public before Twitter was banning them for whatever they're doing. So it's
that's very true.
There's a real difference between message boards and Twitter or Facebook. You know what I mean? Like the immediacy now is like, I don't know. I feel like it just hammers people into like being a certain way. Where on message boards, It was just, kind of like dropping a note out to the world, writing a letter or something, and people gave you shit. It was like, okay, whatever. But I don't know. Social media just feels more in your face, and it seems like it's controlling people more. Plus, there wasn't like, with the message boards, BBS days, there wasn't like fucking algorithms that were like policing your thoughts. You know what I mean?
That's true. On the other hand, I know that, when even at the peak era of RPG message boards, I wasn't earning anywhere near what I earned after, when I started my YouTube channel and post my stuff on Twitter and MeWe and Facebook and what have you, So I guess I could say it's worked for me,
If I just interject for 1 second, I just want to call out the new subscribers during the stream. Right before we started, a Dead Man's Party subscribed, so thank you very much. And Aaron's wife, Dolly Pop, after we had started the show, subscribed. Subscribed yet?
She already apologized for not being subscribed yet on the chat.
That's an issue for Aaron to take care of.
Yeah, Aaron, keep your woman in line.
Oh, Pundit, I've got a question for you, and I can't resist asking this, because the reason I haven't been on the show earlier is because I was always insisting that I wanted to talk to a person and not an ad graphic. So why don't you show your face on your own show?
Well, I for a long time I was concerned not to overlap my personal life with, let's say, my professional life in gaming.
You have a personal life?
Yeah, of course I do. But and like there's a lot of nutcases out there that have, over the years I've been, you could call it doxed, I guess, many a time. Considering that after 5th edition came out, and I was listed alongside other people, including Zach, as a consultant on 5th edition. I received literal death threats, right? So I thought, it's probably a good idea to not be showing to show as little of my personal information, including my appearance, as before. But really, now it's become more than anything a kind of just an element of my of my showmanship, I guess you could say, of my persona, and I don't think that me showing my face, even though I wouldn't be among this current crowd of the other faces here, I don't think it would do badly. It wouldn't necessarily add anything to my to my appeal as such. People are interested in my games and what I write and in my ideas, not so much, I don't think I'm not unattractive again compared to the current crowd.
Obviously the sex appeal draw of this entire podcast.
Yeah, the sex appeal draw of this podcast is huge. Yeah. But I just I don't think anybody would be really obsessed with watching me, right? And one of the things, like an inspiration that led me to realize, hey, I can do a YouTube channel, was Diversity in Comics, which I think is called something else now. But it was like, basically a guy writing about the problems with wokeism in comics today. And he never showed his face. He just showed the comics that he was talking about, And I said, well, a lot of people watch YouTube, but they don't really watch it. They just have it playing on the side while they're doing something else, and so they're basically listening to YouTube. There's a large percentage of viewers that aren't really viewing. They're treating YouTube as if it was a podcast, right? Especially for the talk show part of YouTube. It's a different thing if you're watching, I don't know, some kind of blog of people doing funny skits or something. But when it's about, commentary YouTube, like Ben Shapiro, right? You put it on, if you put Ben Shapiro on YouTube, most people aren't watching the screen. They're just listening to him talk, So I didn't think it was necessary. And now, it's getting to, I think at some point I'm gonna just have to think of some really big event or some really big incentive that'll get me to show my face for the first time in the public gaming sphere, you know.
Live stream from Gen Con.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, or VentureCon. You never know.
Yeah, I got to insert real quick, guys. We
officially
had
unmask
one
the
super
pundits.
chat from Dolly Pop for $5. Thank you very much, Dolly. I think she was. I think
Thank you.
I think it was when I mentioned that I was a sex symbol that she put $5 in there. So thank you, Dolly.
Oh,
Appreciate
she just
it.
took it back.
And then we
Sorry,
also have
Joe.
Snowman 0147 dropped $2 on us to say, are there any supplements for Invisible College?
Hey, thank you for that, Snowman. There aren't any yet, but keep in mind, Invisible College just came out like this year, and it's a 432-page book. It's a pretty complete RPG. And so I'm definitely not saying that there won't be supplements in the future. It's certainly something that can happen. There's, it's as complete as it is, there's always room to add some other interesting stuff to it, or adventures or what have you. Right now, though, we're going to get into shilling our current stuff pretty soon here, and I've been working on a couple of other projects, so it's not on the front burner, so to say. But I think it certainly could be something that comes up later.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's about that time. We should jump into the shill. We're going pretty long here. James Raggi, as our guest of honor, you get to go first.
No, let's let Venture go first because he's got to go to bed.
Oh, he's got to go.
His bedtime is coming. I hope you don't mind, James, but Venture has a strict bedtime, so
yeah, ridiculous.
It's okay. I mean, if Joe already has his other stuff queued up, it's fine.
Bedtime
your shit
for
is up on the
Satanis.
screen. Go for it. You're
okay.
Hey, crap.
Well, I'm slaving away trying to get the third book of the Chult trilogy finished, Chartreuse Shadows. So while I'm doing that, there's no other products coming out. All my attention, all my focus, all my passion is going into that book, which I should have done by the spring. So the only thing other than that I currently have to promote is VentureCon, which is going to take place in Madison, Wisconsin in July. And just going to be all old school, traditional OSR type games. That's all it is. It's strictly a role-playing game convention. There's not going to be board games or card games or a giant dealer's room or, celebrity panel discussion or whatever. It's just going to be like solid 3 days of gaming. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, if you want to attend, it's also limited to 100 people. So grab your ticket, go to VentureCon, see me, game with me. It'll be awesome. That's it. Oh, I learned this from the Jim Raggi School of Self-Promotion.
Well, it's not only gaming, because I promised that you would give someone a lap dance. That was in the chat room first tonight. So
okay, gaming and a couple lap dances. I mean, yeah, with tentacles, obviously.
All right, you're released. You can go to bed now.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, so do you have a graphic up right now, or can I show?
Yeah, it's got all the books with white power and wrapped in a shirt. The picture from your
so they can't
site.
see me right now. Okay, so yeah, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, the mind-bending and merciless tabletop role-playing game. Just released 8 new books for sale a couple months ago. You can find those at lotfp.com. Go to the EU web store. With every order, you get a free bonus item that's got a little adventure in there. And if you order 8 or more books at once, you get a free hardcover book, a throwback edition of the original printing of Death Frost Doom in hardcover. The releases, the books are on a boat right now going to the U.S. We should have things available through the U.S. web store in February. And then, in the weeks after that, getting out to all the retail outlets. Just log on lotfp.com for the details on the releases, go to lotfp.blogspot.com. I did a series of why I published on all of the new things. You can, really see the details of what the things are about. And yeah, I think that's all I got at the moment. So yes, please buy.
You're up, Pundit. Invisible College thing up there.
All right. So currently my latest big product is still the Invisible College, and it's been doing quite well. 432 page occult modern conspiracy OSR. It's got if you want a book on magic, as much as the Job's book is technically a book on magic. If you want to get the down low on the modern version of the Western magical tradition in full, including chaos magic, this is actually a great resource. Now, it doesn't, unlike Job's book, it doesn't tell you how to do magic to be a better DM. It just has a bunch of, you're playing magicians in the game, and it's got a bunch of stuff based on actual ideas people in the modern world have about the occult. And you play heroic members of a secret society that's fighting a secret occult war against less heroic or downright evil groups that want to use magic to dominate humanity. It's an OSR game. If you've got Lion and Dragon or Star Adventure, the system is very similar to that, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it if you pick it up. Besides that, be sure to keep checking out my RPG Pundit Presents series. We've the latest one, I think, is RPG Pundit Presents number 106, if I'm not mistaken, which is The Perils of the Sunken Skyship, an adventure for the World of the Last Sun. Check out the World of the Last Sun book, also a complete gonzo setting that you can play whole hog, or you can divide bits and pieces of it into your own weird fantasy campaign. And in terms of stuff I'm working on, I'm happy to say that right now, Spectre Press will probably by very early next year be releasing the Old School Companion 2, Medieval Authentic Adventures, which is a pretty large book. It's, I forget exactly how much, but it's somewhere between 250 and 300 pages of medieval authentic adventures, of a collection of I think there's something like 13 or more different long adventures, and then a number of shorter scenarios that are playable with any OSR system, though especially good with Lion and Dragon, of course, where you can engage in all kinds of very interesting adventuring that has basis in medieval history, medieval legends, medieval lore, actual medieval events, etc. So be sure to check that out when it comes out. And then also, as I mentioned last time, we have a publisher now for my upcoming book on the Crusades and the Silk Road. It's currently in production. Not sure when it's coming out, but it's going to come out sometime next year. And it's going to be a big book that's going to be full of good stuff. If you liked, Dark Albion and that sort of thing, and it's going to be playable, obviously, for Lion and Dragon. You're going to have a complete guide to the Levant and the entire region of the Silk Road, from like the 1190s to the 1220s, when the Third Crusade was going on, and the Fourth Crusade and the Fifth Crusade and the Children's Crusade, and detailed elements and facts about all of the major locations and cities on the Silk Road. Lots of adventuring stuff, lots of random tables, some new classes for Lion and Dragon, and some Middle Eastern and Oriental magic there. If we can say Oriental, I don't know. Chinese magic mostly. And it's going to be a fantastic setting and campaign book that you can use to run the Crusades or adventuring along the Silk Road, or both. The name is still not completely settled on, but I'll let you guys know when it's when me and the publisher get to an agreement. It's Mad Scribe Games, I think it's the name of the publisher. I hope I remembered that correctly. If my publisher is here, you can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And I guess that's it for now. Check out all my stuff.
All right, thanks, Pundit. Okay, so I'm up. Joe Bittman. I am shilling the Book of Antitheses that has been released under Lamentations imprint. That's James Raggi. Let's see. The book. If you watch Pundit's very first video review on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, you will notice that I triggered him. He was very
my very first video. Period. Yeah.
Yeah, he was very upset with the cultural appropriation that went on with the divination progress. I like to point that out all the time. And he's probably, he's got a little bit of sour grapes because he didn't write a magical tome for RPGs before I did. And Judd Goswick,
I got my bubbles first, didn't I?
So Judd Goswick also in the chat was saying that he's asking for a verbal release. So, if you already have the book, you know what he's talking about. So, Mike, if you legally purchase the PDF or the book, and you are listening to this episode and you're here live with us tonight, I verbally release the claim I have on your soul. Yeah, all right. So let's move on.
You people are all very bizarre.
Some stuff from the live chat here. Seafire 2100 says Pundit is literally an international man of mystery. Adino the Esnite says, I listen to Pundit's video for the commentary, but I watch it for Meatball and Chungus. Yeah, I think in terms of getting YouTube views, I doubt that my face would add a lot of them, but showing my cats always adds more views to my videos. Aaron the Pedantic says Chungus is the face that matters. Yeah. What have we got here? Robe Couture says mystery generates interest. Yeah, probably. Adino says, honestly, I prefer not seeing Pundit's face. Sorry, nothing personal, Pundit. What else have we got? Tarantula says, Pundit will show his face when he buys the D&D IP. I doubt it'll be worth much if I end up buying it.
Is that a segue?
Shadzar says, no, hang on. Invisible College Prom Edition to counter Strixhaven. It's not that kind of college. Invisible College is not about a magic school. It's about a secret order that really existed, by the way. I mean, at least as a mystical movement in the 17th century. The Invisible College was a real thing. Seafire says, no X cards allowed at VentureCon. Well, I certainly hope not. Too bad Venture's already gone, but maybe he saw it. Tarantula says, I never bought any of the Pundit Presents adventures, so that might be worth picking up, assuming I have income by then. Well, I hope you do, because I think most of my adventures are pretty good. And if you like medieval authentic style of play, the Old School Companion 2 will definitely be worth your while. Let's see what else. Kevin the Geordie, who I must have gotten on late, says, oh my, it is the Raginator. Mike Boreal says, here's a question for James. Hey, James, what's your favorite death/black/doom metal band?
Oh,
they're really throwing you the hard balls today.
Yeah, I think Spiritus Mortis, The Year Is One, may have been the best album of the 2010s. Reverend Bazaar is excellent. As far as death metal goes, I like the classic stuff, Old Carcass, Old Entombed, Deicide, that sort of thing. Black metal, I don't like the really badly produced true stuff. I like the stuff that came out of it. Solifald, later Enslaved, things like that. Emperor was always good, but yeah. Yeah, that's good off the top of my head. I'm going to kick myself for not having a much better answer as soon as we go off the air, I bet. But yeah.
Dracopol says Job is a sex symbol, but that symbol is a glyph of warding.
Yeah, I pinned that one. That was pretty good.
Dracopol also said Pundit should name his Crusades and Silk Road supplement the Euro-Christian Colonial Roadshow, or No Fun in Antioch.
Oh, we got to do this one because what's his effing name? Martin Tepley asked this twice already. So, James, when is second edition coming out?
Ooh.
Oh, Jesus, no. Well, we had the playtest thing in the 2018 Free RPG Day book, but
you know it's 2021, right?
Yeah. The current rule book, the current rules and magic book, that's going to be reprinted again, so that's going to be at least another probably 2 or 3 years, well, depending on how fast it sells. But so yeah, that the current rules are going to be the rules for a bit, quite a bit longer. There's nothing I haven't. The second edition rules have, there's not been much done with them since that playtest spread was put in the 2018 book, because apparently people didn't understand the genius of some of the new rules. So,
well, for a long time there, Lamentations was pretty revolutionary. When it first came out, it was very different from most of the kind of OSR clone books, because it had new innovations, and you pioneered the concept of modifying the OSR rules to fit the genre that you wanted it to be, right? And that was brilliant. But of course, today it doesn't seem, compared to some OSR rules, including Lion and Dragon, it doesn't seem all that revolutionary. It still looks a lot more like contemporary D&D than what some people have done with OSR stuff.
Now, I don't know if I agree that the rules themselves, I mean, the presentation, like the flavor texts in the spells and the artwork, I think get across the genre. But where is it really in the rules that enforce the genre?
Well, I think one of the things was, for example, your spell selection, right? You're still using Vancian magic. You're still mostly using D&D spells, apart from a couple of things you added. Your summoning rules obviously were really clever and were a partial inspiration for the summoning rules I put in Dark Albion and Lion and Dragon. But you also took out a bunch of spells that made it very different. So, you didn't have wizards casting fireballs or resurrection spells. And that's a hugely radical difference, because it means that it makes it, the game becomes suddenly one where death is much more final than it normally will be in, say, Forgotten Realms or something like that, yeah. Right? And then other stuff like the fact that only the fighter gets ongoing attack bonuses as he levels, and all of these other elements of niche protection that you put in there for the classes. Those are all very, very clever things that kind of, even if you take out all of your, other stuff that you wrote in the other parts of Lamentations, if you just keep the rules stuff, the inherent, what you can call the inherent setting of the rules has some clear inclinations to it, that it tends towards grittier and more dangerous play.
Yeah, okay.
Hey,
fair enough.
While we're all slobbing on Raggi's knob, I will point out to people who liked the one who watches from below that the whole first section where like hardly any shit happens. That was all what I learned from reading Deathfrost Doom back in 2009 or 10 or something. So I said that before.
Judd Goswick says making summoning a first level spell was dangerous genius. Yeah, and that's super clever. Lord Mateus asks, James, is there a release in 2022 that we should be saving our pennies for?
There better be, hopefully several releases, because all the reasons why there were, 10 new releases at once is something I never want to repeat. So hopefully there will be a number of clusters of smaller releases through the year. I'm going to say it. I'm going to be the one to bring it up. 2022, I really hope that the fucking referee book is done and out, and I never have to hear another goddamn thing about it again. So that's a big one. There's a few other things that may come out, but that depends on the sales of these books, so I can pay the art, pay for the artwork on a lot of things. The Alamarja 1630, that thing's, what was it, 150,000 words, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, just waiting for me to have, what is it, 20,000 euros to dump on art for it. It's just like, oh, fuck. Yeah, and a couple big things like that where I just need, lots of money to pour into art. But then there's a bunch of smaller projects. Even though things didn't move as quickly, I did that appeal for submissions and contributors last year. That sort of stuff is moving along, and some of that should appear in 2022. Kelvin and Alex should have at least a couple things out in 2022. And Alex is still, I swear every idea he has is, well, let's see if this kills the company. So, yeah.
So a question. Sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No. That's fine.
Right. Another question that's somewhat related, I guess, from Judd Goswick. He says, "Who is an author you would love to have an LOTFP book from?"
Oh, wow. Who's a big name who's just by slapping their name on the cover will sell tons and tons of copies? Somebody like that. That would be nice. Something.
Jonas Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. We got
Avril
Dolly
Lavigne.
Pop asks, where did the name LOTFP come from?
That was the name of my music zine that I did 1998 through 2005. And that was named because I saw this. I saw the personal website of this red-haired Finnish girl back then, and I just became like obsessed and created this mythology. And then when I started the metal zine, I wanted a name that would make it clear that it was about more European style melodic, bands like Opeth, like My Dying Bride, like maybe melodic's not exactly the right word for My Dying Bride, but the stuff that was stuff that wasn't just the blood and guts US death metal standard style. Because by 1998, I was kind of off of that. I still like the older stuff, but it was just like, how much more did I need in my life? Bands like Amorphous and then The Gathering and all these things that it was a different focus while still having that underground metal vibe. And yeah, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, that could have been a cheesy song title on an early Theater of Tragedy album, where they had song titles like A Hamlet for a Slothful Vassal. So,
Right, Mike Boreal asked, "Hey James, what do you think is the heaviest album ever recorded?"
Oh Jesus. I couldn't. Oh boy, I would. God, you're gonna short out my brain while I'm having an internal debate about what's heavy. Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one because pure heaviness isn't even something that I look for necessarily.
since he's passed, I think we should all assume that in his heart of hearts, James thinks Voulez-Vous by ABBA is the heaviest album of all time. Mike Boreal also asked me, he said, hey, Pundit, I have Dark Albion, and I think it's awesome, but that it's a bit overwhelming setting-wise. Of all the areas of Albion, where do you think the adventurers should start? And my experience with Dark Albion and other people's experiences running it too, tells me that it's not really about having a starting area. It's about what campaign you want to run with it. And there are basically 3 kind of default campaigns that have emerged from Albion as a setting, the most typical ones that you could run. The first is that you're a group of individuals that are part of an entourage of a noble, either one of the player characters or one of the NPCs that get caught up in the events of the War of the Roses. That was the original Dark Albion campaign, which started, by the way, as a Lamentations campaign. It started when we started playing the campaign that played for like 8 years, right? The start of the campaign, we were all playing Lamentation rules, and by the end of it, we were playing the proto version of what became Lion and Dragon, because we went on making adaptations to it. But so that's the first type of campaign you can run with it. The second one, which was what prompted me to come out with Cults of Chaos, which is still, I think, probably mechanically one of the best books I've ever done, it's a guide to creating sinister cults and nemesis groups with a bunch of random tables with full details as to what, these witches or heretics or demon worshippers or criminal cults or what have you are doing in a medieval authentic context. That campaign default is what I call the Inquisitor campaign, where you've got a group of people that are working as investigators or enforcers for the clerical order. And then the third one is what you could call the city campaign, which is that you pick a specific medieval city in the setting. In the main book, you have London, but there's a lot of RPG Pundit Presents issues that came out detailing other places that you could use, like Essex and which other ones did I do? I don't even remember now. But there's a series of city books that came out that give a lot of details of what these cities look like, including Oxford and Cambridge in Medieval College Adventures, and Hull, I think, is one of them. Yeah. So you pick that place, and you're playing a group of people that are possibly members of one of the local gangs or down on their luck mercenaries or that sort of thing, and you're dealing with adventures connected to that locale. And I think those are the 3 basic campaigns that you can run with Dark Albion. Anyway, since it was asked, I thought I should answer, even though it wasn't a question for James.
Yeah, I think we got one more for James. It says Robert Nemeth says, James, are you a fan of Doom or sludge metal?
Classic Doom, I think, in the Candlemas vein. Candlemas, Reverend Bazaar, Solitude Aeternus, Spiritus Mortis, I already mentioned. That sort of thing, yeah. And even like the 70s throwback inspired stuff, the witchcraft and that sort of thing, like back when they first started. Yeah, not so much sludge though. Like I remember the old days of like I Hate God and things like that. It wasn't my thing.
All right. Well, anyone else got any more questions for James? Now's the time to post them. We were going to talk about some of the most recent stupidity from Wizards of the Coast, but I think we'd go way over time if we did that at this point.
I'm not sure what take a half an hour.
What's wrong with going overtime? It's almost 5 a.m. here. Sun's not even up. What's wrong?
I'll do it. You want to do it? You want to do it, Pundit? You got stuff to do.
No, I mean, I can talk about it for a while anyway.
All right, cool. All right, let's go to our next topic.
I was going to worry you'd advertise this in the graphic, because like we can't false advertise.
All right, roll for initiative, bigot.
Jesus.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing.
God. Now my face is on there.
they were already doing stupid stuff when they tried to say, you know, orcs aren't evil anymore. But now they've gone another, you know, they've doubled down, or I don't know, this is more like quadrupled down, and said beholders and mind flayers aren't evil anymore. And it's just
to introduce this real quick, so everybody, we're responding to the. I know a number of our listeners out there right now have already done this, but the Dungeons and Dragons: Wizards of the Coast removes problematic lore from 5th edition. So, go ahead, Pundit. Sorry.
Yeah, they're basically editing out stuff from 5th edition that they now consider not in accordance with their religious ideology, you know, of wokeism. But they've taken it to absurd lengths, you know, like the beholder is the all of the lore section describing the beholder as you know, a kind of a paranoid creature that despises everybody other than sometimes even including other beholders, you know. Removing the idea that mind flayers are evil, you know, and it's just nuts. And I mean, some of the justifications for this, right? Like I couldn't grasp like even what they were thinking when they said, well, you know, the text about beholders is problematic, until one of the SJWs in Twitter said the quiet part out loud, I guess, and they said that beholders are apparently. They were used to mock the mentally ill, you know, like apparently that's the argument, right? That beholders are ableism, and so the text had to be removed, you know. It's just it's crazy. It's just that the you know, parody sites can't keep up with this nonsense.
Yeah. So you know, there was a bunch of changes. Who is it? Aaron the Pedantic did his little video early and pointing out that Ray Winninger, if you know who that is, posted you know, a response like, it's not that bad. I went through and I looked up some of the stuff, you know, as it pertained to Volo's Guide for Monsters. So the thing, you know, I went through and pulled out Volo's Guide for Monsters and looked at all the sections they actually removed from it. Basically, what it looks like they removed is slavery, cannibalism, and just anything that was dunking on orcs. So, like, for example, what are some of the best ones out of here? So, well, that's an orc one. But okay, so the very first one is like they pulled out the section on page 26, paying the price. And basically it's like, fire giants on many occasions have ransomed captives back to their families or communities. Once the giants determined that a slave has no particular talent they needed, and others were willing to pay for its return. Anyway, fire giants prefer payment in mithril, adamantium, or different slaves, ones with more useful talents or stronger backs. So basically, if you go through the whole thing, everything they pulled out was about slavery, cannibalism. I think they just want to leave those topics up to third parties like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and then all the rest of it, all of the actual removals were all about orc stuff. So like the stuff they pulled out about kobolds on page 66, like a kobold isn't clever, but it isn't as stupid as an orc. So, like, literally that one sentence is what got pulled. The whole fucking sidebar on role-playing and a kobold got pulled over. Let's see. You know.
Well, once again, the SJWs are incredibly racist human beings, because they're the only people I know that look at an orc and think that's a black person. You know,
right?
like
exactly, or whatever minority.
It's insanity.
They might be. So yeah, here's another one from the half-orc section that was pulled out. The lore of humans depicts orcs as rapacious fiends, intent on coupling with other humanoids to spread their seed far and wide. Which is a great sentence. I mean, that sounds like something I would write, but They pulled out all the cannibalism stuff from the Yuan-Ti section, and then
isn't that spreading their seed far and wide, screwing everything? Isn't that like canon in Doctor Who as to what humans are?
I don't know. Doctor Who suck. You and Pundit like Doctor Who. I always hated that shit. Terrible. The lore makes no sense. They're just throw the kitchen sink at everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Here. Oh wait. I got one more thing on the orc thing. So the orc traits they replaced on page 120. The alignment trait has been removed. The menacing trait has been replaced with the following trait: primal intuition. Is that really that much better? Really, they still got the primitive primal. It's still got that shit in there. And then on top of it, you got this. I got a screen cap of this one. So sage advice. If you Pundit and Raggi, if you look at your screen in 30 seconds. So Sage Advice still has the same header, which is some art from one of the core books from 5e of like a half elf and a half orc scratching his head. So it's obviously like Sage Advice where they're like putting down, they're like retconning all of this orc lore and half orc lore. They have a stereotypical image of a half orc that's just too stupid to understand whatever plan they're going on. So if Wizards is serious that Jeremy Crawford is going to have this header image changed on the WotC site as soon as possible.
Well, you know what? Like I pointed out, I did a video about this a couple of days ago, so I've said a lot of my piece in there. And if you haven't, if any of you in the audience have not seen it yet, check out my video. I talk about this, but I'm talking about it in a bigger context of other stuff going on with D&D, where I say this explains what's wrong with most 5th edition D&D players. That's the title of the video. And what I'm actually pointing out is how most 5th edition gamers, they did a study about this, and most 5th edition gamers have never played a campaign that lasted longer than 6 sessions, and so that explains a lot of the things they don't get about D&D. But I also commented on that video about these this editing out of stuff where, when they're always going to go further, right? This is the problem with this particular ideology, these totalitarians, is that it's never going to ever be enough for them, because when they first did the changes on the orcs, what they were saying was, orcs are humanoids, they're a humanoid race, and so, you can't discriminate against them because they're like black people, which is just insane. Again, not my point of view. That's the point of view of SJWs. But they were saying, obviously there are evil creatures in the D&D world. And now they're saying, no, you know what? There is no evil because, they don't want to say even aberrations like beholders and mind flayers are evil, because they realize that they themselves are aberrations. I think that the main problem here is that a lot of them subconsciously recognize the similarities between beholders and themselves. So they're trying to avoid us to create a society where aberrations are not looked upon badly, because they know that if people recognize that there is such a thing as good and evil, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble, and that's, I think, fundamentally what it's about. But it's a problem that they're never going to stop with this, and this is why they have to be fought, because there is no compromise that is ever enough for a totalitarian. I mean, Mario Vargas Llosa, one of the great critics of Latin American communism, points this out, right? When you have an ideology that's based on some idea of absolute equity, then that doesn't mean, we're going to take some money from the rich and give it to the poor, and then that's going to be the end of it. It ends up meaning that in a society that's obsessed with this concept, that if we see every instance of someone having something as being something that is stolen from somebody else, right? That it's somehow an ill-gotten gain, then that means that the person who is somewhat better at math has somehow hurt or damaged the person who's worse at math, and that the person who has almost nothing except a pair of shoes on his feet has somehow stolen that from the person who has nothing, even a pair of shoes on their feet, and that's what causes that there will always be this constant push to move to the next stage of creating a society where everything is balanced towards everyone having and being nothing. That's what they want.
Okay.
What's your take, Jim?
Okay. Well, several things. Number one, are we thinking that Wizards of the Coast, that the people implementing this, are they true believers, or are they catering to some portion of their fan base?
I know that they are true believers. They are
so
the Twitterati that are doing this stuff.
Okay,
I
now
met them. I've seen them multiple times. I've talked to them in person.
And what percentage of the Dungeons and Dragons, the official D&D fan base, what proportion of them do we think would applaud these changes?
The same as you see in regular society. We know, there was a massive study done by a left-leaning organization about people's views on this social justice culture. And what they determined is that roughly 8% of the population support this, and it's the 8% that are doing all of the pushing of this agenda. And everybody else doesn't like it to different degrees, So
but
they're catering to a tiny minority of people who are doing it not because they are fans of the game. They're doing it because this is their crusade. The people that Wizards is trying to cater to are people that will condemn Wizards no matter what happens. They will briefly applaud when Wizards does give in to one of their demands, and then they won't buy the books anyways because they don't really care about playing the game. They just care about changing the game to fit their agenda.
So you think Wizards is doing this to appeal to non-players?
Largely, yes.
Okay. Well, the thing is,
I don't think that Hasbro knows that, but I think that's what it is.
Right. Well, how hands-on is Hasbro with Wizards and D&D anyway? I'm not sure.
Clearly not enough, apparently.
Well, I mean, I haven't played officially branded D&D games since the 90s with 2nd edition. I never touched 3rd edition or 4th. I bought the Dungeon Master's Guide and the starter box set in 2014, when 5th edition first started. So, but I never played using them. So to me, it's like Dungeons and my problem with D&D doing this is not that they've actually done it, not that they're going in this direction, because it's just like I don't care. It's out of my experience. My problem is how they're promoting it and the spin they put on it. It's not that, hey, we've got, we're making changes to D&D to make it relevant for the kids today. It's now, whatever hopefully not cheesy way they put that. It's like, that's going to be fine. D&D is going to constantly change. People wanting D&D to stay the same pretty much lost that battle when the Greyhawk supplement came out in 1975. And then,
Sure.
I was fine with it through 2nd edition. 3rd edition is where, I bounced off hard, and then I joined the OSR because, we were going to take back the real D&D. And then we all made our own stuff, and it's like, well, we don't need real D&D. Fuck real D&D. And then when 5th edition first came out, I noticed it was drawing like a lot of old schoolers back in. A lot of people were telling me, oh yeah, now we use Lamentations adventures with the D&D rules. So it's sometimes the changes are going to be more to your liking, sometimes they're not. And the fact that it's changing and they're wanting to appeal a certain way, it's like, okay, we're all old fucks. We're going to complain about it anyway. The fact that they're not doing it to appeal, as a marketing move, as a creative move to appeal to a certain crowd, but it's done in moral terms. That's what really gets me. That we're not doing this because we think it's a good idea to appeal to our fans. We're doing this because this thing, which we coincidentally believe in, is the one moral and right thing to do, which by implication means everyone not doing it is, an immoral, nasty person. Yeah. And it's the same thinking that pisses me off. Like all of the old TSR stuff up on drive-through has that boilerplate disclaimer. Oh, that has attitudes that were wrong then and wrong now, just plastered on fucking everything. I mean, there are some things that maybe, you could put that there and it's like, yeah, fair, but they just put it on everything. Like it's old, therefore it's evil and bad. And that's horseshit. That's absolute fucking garbage. It's like, yes, this is what you prefer, and if the people making the game, if they're true believers, then shouldn't they be making something that they believe in, even if we might not like that they're the current stewards of D&D? It's like, if that's what they think the game should be, then that's what they should do with it. And if it flops, you get someone else in there that'll change the game, more to their taste. But it's the putting it in the moral terms that really pisses me off.
It's not about appealing to gamers. It's about imposing on gamers. These are people that think that RPGs have always been and are currently a toxic environment, right? That it's an enemy of their agenda. And so the idea is not just like, and you've seen this also in comics, you see it in Doctor Who, you see it in all kinds of other TV shows and things like that. It's not just about not appealing to the actual fan base. It's about teaching the fan base a lesson, right? Punishing them for not having the right views, and that's what they're doing. It's the worst kind of cultural warfare.
Right. It's the whole thing of like somehow history was reset in 2014 and all the progress that happened before 2014 did not happen somehow. And we're in this like alternate universe where like all of a sudden like, oh, there's black actors in TV shows and all the other crap.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, I just wanted to mention here, Rob Couture asked a question in live chat. He said, besides the 8%, how many else just go along with the 8%? Another, I don't remember if it was the Electronic Freedom Foundation or who else. There was another organization concerned with the question of censorship in modern society that did another study where basically they asked people, how comfortable are you publicly sharing your own personal and political views in public, right? And it turns out that almost nobody is comfortable anymore doing that. The only people who listed that they were comfortable doing that were the 8% who identify as being, progressive liberals, like the SJWs, basically, because that's exactly what they want. They want to create a society where they can say anything, as insane as as it is, racist stuff, stuff that advocates murder, stuff that advocates arson, anything at all, with absolute impunity, because they believe they are they're the chosen ones, and that everybody else should be afraid to say things because they will be destroyed if they say something wrong, from the point of view of these people that are a tiny part of our society that has nevertheless, through entryism, been able to take control of an agenda that almost nobody wants.
Well, yeah, it's that's unfortunate. It's just the question of how do you fight it. I mean, I'm, talking in a greater political cultural space. I mean, I'm more a fan of people like Greg Lukianoff and Fire and John McWhorter than I am someone like Chris Rufo, for example. I don't know if I'm getting too far in the weeds for people, with those examples.
You're talking about.
Chris Rufo was tremendously effective this year, I'd have to say,
But the problem is, though,
Washington. He lives in Seattle. I talked to him.
Yeah, but doing the stuff like wanting to ban, CRT from schools and want to ban this and ban it's still banning. That's not the way to go because it's just a different regime.
Schools are a captive audience, right? And basically the question becomes, does the government own your children? And that's, I think, a very legitimate question to point out, but by tradition that is not the case, But the SJWs want to create a situation where basically every individual is owned by the government, and of course that's adults too. But obviously where they have the most success is in their ability to control the first 18 years or 24 years, because the universities are just as bad, if not worse, of a child's education. The Jesuits used to say, give me a child for 8 years and I'll give you a Catholic for life, right? And this is exactly the same thing. If you're, doesn't matter what a parent tries to do, if their kid is in public school and that school is indoctrinating them nonstop for 6 hours a day for 12 years, they're going to win the culture war, But and part of what they're indoctrinating these kids in believing is that free speech is a bad thing, and that you shouldn't be allowed to say certain things, and that you need to punish people and report people that do say bad things. They're creating little Stalinists,
Yeah, but using the law to just outright ban certain things like that is telling the teachers and basically controlling the curriculum just from a different angle. It's going to lead to places that are just as bad as the thing they're fighting. It's just a question of, oh, we like this better and we hate that, so it's okay. It's like, no, this idea of the control is bad whichever way it's coming from. If your problem is like, oh my God, they're indoctrinating with this ideology, the answer is not enforce my ideology instead, and that fixes it.
That's not what's being done. Yeah. What's being done is to try to return to the classical liberal mode of education. I mean, would you be saying the same thing if instead of a group of communists infiltrating the public schools and teaching their people's kids basically to engage in racial segregation, if instead of that it was a group of white supremacists and doing entryism into public schools and teaching kids, to like National Socialism, like would you feel the same way, or would you say no? We've got to not let these people teach this anti-liberal ideology, because fundamentally the big problem, a lot of people that still want in their heart of hearts to think that they belong to the Democratic Party or the liberal party of a country, is that they don't get that party is dead, and now there's a group of Stalinists that are wearing the skin suits of what were traditionally the liberal parties, and that what they're promoting is actually a completely anti-liberal agenda. They're against the classical ideas. Ironically, critical race theory is the least is a education concept that in praxis demands that you engage in zero critical thinking. Right? They use the word critical, but they tell every single child, if you think anything other than what we're teaching you, you are not just wrong, but you should probably die. That's what we're fighting against.
Yes, but how you do it is important, because the problem is when I'm talking about, these bills to ban this, it's many different laws or proposed laws in a bunch of different places, and they're not all the same. So it's difficult to generalize, but I don't. It's like, okay, a lot of the stuff, and the thing is, when stuff that's communicated online, it's difficult to know what's nut picking. Here's this crazy thing that someone did that's isolated, and something that what's being done regularly. What is an actual thing? I think we lost Job, and that's why it's difficult for me to agree that they are all like this. It's like, are they? It's like some are, but is this such a? It's difficult for me to get that gung ho about taking all of this out, because the people that are highlighting this have their own agendas, which are their own. And okay, I'm rambling. I wasn't prepared to go into this in detail, but it's just the danger of it's like even if you accept that the danger is real, creating something like, the McCarthy era, we're gonna root out those Reds, that shit's toxic too, and I'm not comfortable with the banning, and we're gonna legally make sure that you can and can't get rid of this specific ideology, and it because the people that make the laws, the people that implement the laws and enforce the laws, I don't for a second believe, because it's generally going to be Republicans in charge of doing this, fighting against the Democrats that are, to one degree or another in various areas, pushing this stuff in schools. I don't trust the Republicans one tiny little bit more than I do the Democrats.
I'm with you, sir, but I think you're, James, let me just say something, Pundit. I think you're pretty far removed from like what America is like now, just being an expat for so long. And, I'm a parent over here. In the Seattle school district, I live nearby, but they're importing the same stuff. They're decolonizing math now in Seattle. So they're doing the whole 2 + 2 = 5, and there's other ways of knowing math. Like, that's CRT. Like, how do you combat that other than being like, okay, we need to shut this down? Like, how do you stop that? How do you stop teachers from starting to teach 2 + 2 = 5? This is a real fucking thing.
That's true.
What's your response, James?
Well, putting Republicans in charge put libertarians in charge. God damn it, that's how you fix everything.
Well, I have no love for Republicans either, honestly. I mean, I like a populist Republican maybe, because I just don't know who else to fucking trust at this point.
Well, here's the thing: there's nobody on the right that's saying 2 + 2 = Jesus, right? Nobody's saying that. Nobody's arguing for that, right? So the left always tries to bring up this shibboleth of the Republicans would try to create a religious theocracy or something like that, or would go back to the days of the Klan or something, even though the Klan was Democrat. It was invented by Democrats and it was always Democrats who were involved there. When that's absurd, right? Like the free speech movement, I was always fundamentally, until 2014, I never identified myself as being on the right. I identified myself as being on the left. But the reason for that was that my fundamental belief is first and foremost in free speech, and second in liberal values, in libertarianism, as you say, And the problem was that back in the early 90s, if I believed in free speech and I believed in libertarian values, then I was a Democrat, right? Because the right was all about, Pat Robertson and company. But in 2021, there is no room for someone who believes in free speech or in liberal values in any part of the left, in most, at least in most of the Anglo-Saxon countries of the Western world. And now I do agree with you, James, that in an ideal world, what we'd have is libertarians in charge. I'm totally with you on that, because I'm fundamentally a libertarian too. I've said for a long time, we're using an education system that is literally 700 years old, and it doesn't serve us well anymore. It's become hopelessly corrupt to the point that what you need to really do is tear it down and invent something totally different, right? But that's not necessarily a pragmatic thing to argue right now, because there isn't enough push for it. But what there is, for example, the idea of school choice, right? Where you could have, a voucher system, and parents can choose to homeschool their kids, to pod school their kids, to send them to a private school, to send them to a charter school, and have at the grassroots level, people choosing for themselves which way they want to educate their children. But the greatest enemies of that idea, that very libertarian idea of people getting to choose how they pursue education, is the left, right? Which is because what they want. I mean, part of it is, we want to defend the teachers union or something like that. But the real motive is they want to keep their establishment in control of what your children learn and think,
but the Republicans do the same thing when they're in charge. So I mean, it's easy when you're fighting the cultural hegemony. It's easy to really seem like, oh, you're the ones for freedom and being able to do your own thing. It's like in the 80s into the 90s when the cultural mood was far more conservative. Then it's the same liberal thinking that was, oh, we're against this. So it's like, okay, they're the ones for freedom. But then look what happens when they won. And now they're in charge, and now they're going to press everyone else down. And it's just this dance that's going to go back and forth. So it's like, okay, the left is pushing too hard with this stuff. So it's going to be the more right-wing people that think, okay, take the freedom back, and then they're going to be in charge, and they're going to start pressing down. And it's just this seesaw that it's like, okay, that makes sense in the moment, depending, whatever moment you're in, who's ever on top, you want to fight against them. Okay, but surely there is a solution that levels off the seesaw. Surely that's possible.
No,
not easy, but
I think that the non-crazy libertarian wing of American politics, which is to say the people that aren't members of the Libertarian Party, which is a clown show, right? Everybody now who is a libertarian who isn't part of the Libertarian Party is a Republican. And I mean, there's been the part that we don't say, I mean, as much as there was a massive entryism of the socialists and communists that took over the Democratic Party, the Republican Party now has a huge faction that are what you could call cultural libertarians, right? And all of the school choice proponents are coming from the Republican Party now. So if you're looking at on a just a pragmatic level, which of the two parties is more likely to want to control every aspect of your life right now, it's pretty clear that the Republican Party is the one that, if you've got to bet on one of the two, it's the one that you're going to bet on,
Right. If you can't say that there's two biological genders, then what how can you even move forward? I mean,
yeah, but then just a year ago, Mike Pence was next in line to be president of the United States. And that's as Republican as anything else. I mean, that...
Okay, but now we have Kamala Harris. Jesus fuck.
Well, now we have... Well, right. It's all shit. I'm not going to say,
I'd rather have Mike Pence
like
any
this shit
day,
better
Jesus
because
Christ.
It's got peanuts. Let me eat that shit.
I don't think...
I think
I'm not a fan of Mike Pence.
Reality.
I wasn't a fan of Mike Pence ever. I mean, but I don't think that if he'd become president, we'd be, the U.S. would be living in The Handmaid's Tale or something like that. That's a leftist fantasy that they invented. I think that he wouldn't have been, in all that especially socially conservative, and I think that, you can argue about Mike Pence being a part of the Republican Party, but he's a part that's diminishing. The percentage of fundamentalist evangelical Christians in the Republican Party has been going down as a proportion of the Republican Party as a whole for the last decade or more. And what we have seen is that in the last couple of years, basically from Trump onwards, the percentage of Latinos who are voting Republican Party keeps going up. The percentage of Black people who vote for the Republican Party keeps going up. The percentage of gay people who vote for the Republican Party is going up. There were always, the log cabin Republicans, but Trump brought us Twinks for Trump, and I think that what we have is a party that, because it's a big tent, encompasses a lot of different views, but what it'll fundamentally support is the things it fundamentally agrees on, which is not necessarily what agenda we impose, but rather what agenda do we oppose, and what we want to oppose is an agenda that is fundamentally anti-Western, anti-free speech. The people that are fighting back against social media censorship are all in the Republican Party. The left had this whistleblower from Facebook, and their entire argument was Facebook isn't censoring people enough. It was a complete, it was a complete joke.
But if the Republicans get what they wanted, and the people say, "Oh, we've had enough of this Democrat left-wing bullshit, so yes, let's go all in on the Republicans." I don't think that there's any less lunacy. Yes, there is a more sensible wing of the Republican Party, just like there are sensible people in the Democrat Party. But when you're in charge, you're going to act like you're in charge. And the entire U.S. system is just fucked because the entire world is boiled down to A or B. Which one should be in charge? It's one thing about being in Finland. There's like 6 or 7 political parties that are viable, that have members, have members of their party represented in parliament. And it's like, okay, well, 6 or 7 is still a limited way to chop up the world, but there's not this thing where you're going to organize on one side because you hate the other side. It's like, what a shitty way to run a country and run a world. And it's,
there's a reason why George Washington in his final address as president warned people about the danger of party politics, right? I mean, the American Constitution wasn't meant to be designed along the line of political parties at all, much less just a 2-party system. So I can agree with you on that. But there's another big danger, which is that, if you have a political system where all of the establishment parties agree to be essentially appeasers to one extreme agenda, which is not really what happens in the United States, where you have a division, that can look bad. But when you look at Canada or the UK, where the Conservatives and the Labour Party, or in Canada, the Conservatives and the Liberal Party, are basically completely on board with the agenda of the far left. What happens there is that if you want to create extremists, that's how you're going to get extremists, right? When the entire establishment has a lock on power and they're all on the same agenda, and the only people that are fighting that agenda are members of extremely radical parties, then you're going to get more people going to those radical parties. And that's maybe not the thing you want to have happen, right? So really the best thing that can happen is to have a political party that stands up to the principles of civic nationalism, as opposed to, postmodernist neo-Marxism, which is, it doesn't seem like rocket science that if you're the Conservative Party, you maybe don't want to just present yourself as, we have the same agenda as the left, only a little bit slower, Yeah.
See, I'm going
to. The problem is, you say, "Oh, there are good people in the Democratic Party." Yeah, that's true. But the good people in the Republican Party stand up for the things that they're arguing for, right? Guys like Rand Paul, that will not. They're people that won't go in lockstep with a single agenda. And I mean, the Republican Party doesn't have a single agenda; it's divided into camps. Whereas the relatively okay Democrats, with just a couple of very rare exceptions, mostly guys like Minchin, who has to be more conservative because he's from West fucking Virginia, and if he acts the least bit progressive, he's going to lose his seat, right? With those very rare exceptions, the supposedly moderate Democrats have completely broken down into appeasing their most radical wing of their party, and that's a big problem. Trump is not, by the way, the most radical wing of the right. He's the solution to not going towards something far worse. Like if it's like in ancient Rome, you had Gracchus trying to do reforms, and if you kill Gracchus, then what comes next, is going to be a lot worse than Gracchus. You end up with Julius Caesar, and that's the end of the Republic.
Trump is an idiot. I mean, he doesn't know what the... Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, yes, he was a funny tweeter, but that's about as far as it went. The idea that Trump is a solution is like, gee, I'm not on board with that.
It wasn't great,
not on
but
board.
I mean, he ended the wars, and the economy was great.
Yeah, he was the first actually anti-imperialist president in any of our entire lifetimes, right? On the right or on the Republican or the Democrat side, right?
Well, I'll be on board that the entirety of Donald Trump is not evil and bad, but on the whole, generated
one of the greatest economies in our lifetimes too, right? If you care about that sort of thing, but which a lot of working class people do, right? It's I'm not saying the guy was perfect. He did he got a lot of things wrong. And one of the big problems he had is that he vastly underestimated how much of a challenge it is to oppose the deep state. He thought that being president with a wave of his hand, he could drain the swamp, and the swamp is not just the big problem he did is he didn't drain the Republican Party first, right? So he had a bunch of people in his own camp that were actively working against everything in his agenda,
Oh boy, if I knew we were going here, I would have brushed up and done some research, because I'm just remembering the past 5 years of articles and things and passing through, but I can't grab on to, that it's, I would be very happy if Donald Trump started, well, I don't think he's allowed on YouTube, but if he did a podcast, I'd be happy for Trump to be a podcaster. I don't want him in government again. That was, there's got to be.
If you're a Democrat and you don't want Donald Trump to pull an Andrew Jackson and win another non-consecutive election, the best thing you could be doing is opposing the insanity in the Democratic Party. But unfortunately, you'd be like rarer than a white rhino, right? It's like it's you and maybe Bill Maher, and that's it. Like everybody else, it's an endangered species. The free speech Democrat is an endangered species.
Maybe, but yeah, the Republicans. I don't know, because even, oh boy. Yeah, I wish I had a chance to do some research, because Donald Trump didn't seem like a big free speech guy himself. He was definitely calling for the banning of people and not very much, wishing he could take more steps against the people criticizing him. But again, I don't have the references off the top of my head, because I read this stuff, it goes in, and then I don't keep track of where
So you heard it here first. James is still in the Matrix. Eventually, hopefully, if he reads my book, The Book of Antitheses, he might be able to break himself out. We'll see. Needs to get a little more knowledge, but
well, just to let you know,
to put you on the spot here, right? But
just to let you know just how far out there I am politically from any mainstream movement. The last person I voted for in any election was Michael Badnarik in the 2004 presidential election. That was the guy that I believe he's the one that he thought that zip codes were an unconstitutional apportionment of U.S. territory. That's the last guy I voted for. I I would have voted Bernie in 2016 because I liked him more. You know,
Bernie.
He's
well,
imploded, man. He's terrible now.
Well, but the European system, I mean, Finland, people say, oh, socialism, like the Nordic countries. Finland is a capitalist country that has, you know, this welfare state bolted on the side of it. And people really seem to be less panicked and less worried in their day-to-day life about catastrophe than, you know, poor people in Finland versus poor people in the U.S. So I'm sympathetic to the idea of a bigger social safety net. So Sanders, you know, was saying things like, oh, like Denmark or whatever. It's like, okay, I can be on board with that. Certainly better than fucking Hillary. Certainly better than. But then 2020, I was like, oh yeah, Yang's looking good to me. So that's, you know, and then. Yeah, so Andrew Yang, when he was doing a new political party, he's like, "Oh, a new thing to follow that will never win." But it's stuff that seems if the world was sensible, he seems like he would be a successful politician. The problem is the world's not sensible, but I'm just not going to follow, you know, one side of insanity because right now I hate the other. I think the other side is slightly more insane.
Well, Trump was basically fucking Bernie. Trump was Bernie as far as his economic policies. You know, Bernie was going on about bring the you know, manufacturing back to the U.S., you know, and that's what I liked about Bernie. And Trump did that shit. He was saying the same thing. Just go back and look at it. And then Bernie decided, I don't know what, he got sold something from the Democratic Party, and he's just.
They bought him a mansion.
Yeah, and
he sold out for a new house.
I used to listen to Tom Hartman, and Bernie did Brunch with Bernie every Wednesday. I listened to that shit for like 3 years. I don't remember the years, but. And I liked all the shit that Bernie was talking about, but Trump actually did it, you know? So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can sympathize with the argument that you're making, James, but you know, my point of view about who to, you know, where to orient myself politically is pretty similar to my point of view of when it comes to gaming. I tell my viewers, you know, don't buy products from people who despise you and who hate your hobby, you know. And you know, I would say don't vote for a party that clearly despises you, you know. And right now the Democrats, you know, despise an enormous percentage of the American population, a lot of whom keep voting Democrat either because they've fallen for these boogeymen that the left invents, or because of pure inertia, right? Because they're thinking that the Democrats are the same Democrats of like Bill Clinton era, you know, something like that.
Well, you see, I'm more of the attitude, buy the products that appeal to you. I know I've given some money to people who have shit all over me in recent years. They released something that looked interesting, and it's like, oh, okay, I buy that. And I'm just wondering what the look on their face was when they saw that you know, I had ordered through their store. But yeah, the work is more important than the personality behind it. And when it comes to art, that whole attitude, I mean, that's, I don't know, that's the bad thing that the weird leftists do. It's like, oh, we don't like them because, you know, they're racist, sexist, blah blah blah. They hate us, so we want to exclude them. It's like doing the same thing in reverse just perpetuates the cycle of we're on top now. No, we're on top now.
Well, it's not exactly the same thing, because the left just doesn't say, don't buy Jim Raggi's books. What they say is, make a mass writing campaign to Drive Through RPG and to Amazon to ban Raggi's books because he's a white supremacist and a homophobe, and get in touch with MasterCard and make sure that Raggi doesn't get to have, MasterCard or PayPal transactions so that he starves to death, because we don't want him to be able to sell his products even from out of a shack if that was what it came down to.
But those
are the politics of destruction that they're doing, right? It's not just saying
the exact same
don't
sort
buy
of
its products. They're not equal measures that are being pushed.
Well, they're not equal measures now, but like right-wing organizations like, what was it, the PTC, what was that, the Parents Television Council, they would generate letter-writing campaigns against.
Yeah, but that was like in the 1970s or something, right? Like,
that's into the 90s. But that's the exact point. It's just a matter of who has the cultural power at the moment and who feels good. It's like the Christopher Hitchens line about Christianity, how it's all right now about, Jesus all meek and mild, as, follow him, he's a good person, but never forget what they were like when they were strong. And what your sort of attitude there, it's like, yeah, it sounds good if you're the beleaguered underdog, but if you win, even if it's not you personally, someone taking up the mantle of power, after you've, paved the way to victory, is going to be acting the exact same way against the people who are right now getting to set the terms.
I'll have to disagree with you, James, there, because we're around the same age. I've lived through a Republican controlled whatever, and the Republicans controlled culture. They tried to ban culture, and now I'm living through this Democratic controlled whatever, and they're trying to ban who can make payments, feed their families, what you get injected into your body. I mean,
they're trying to ban people.
There's no fucking comparison. Like, this is really fucked up, and if it goes back the other way, I don't really, from my experience of America so far, I don't think it's going to go back in the other direction where Republicans are mandating my my medical life. I mean, maybe abortion or something. Maybe I don't know, but
I don't think that's a maybe. I think
but
if they
I
can,
don't
they
care.
would.
I mean, everyone knows where babies comes from. Like, don't get pregnant. Fuck, who cares?
I mean,
or have an abortion pill.
Right. We're all the same age.
Don't have this abortions where it's up to
right.
practically birth in some of the states. Like, that's.
I hated the religious right for a big portion of my life, right? Because we all grew up in an era where there were people that were trying to shut down Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal and punk music and
right. It was like cultural things, not like books and all actually that sort of stopping you from living your life. Like,
but I would much rather live in Reagan era United States than in Soviet Poland, right? and the problem is that the two things are not the same, right? Like there's only one side that wants to eliminate problematic people, not just eliminating ideas they don't like. They're both bad. I want to live in a society where anyone can say anything they want to and write anything they want to and read anything they want to and play anything they want to, right? But and have the sexuality they want to, as long as they're not imposing it on anyone else, against their consent. But I recognize that there's different degrees of the extremism, right? And if it's somebody younger, they might not think, because if they've been taught communism is wonderful, they might think, well, the Soviet Union wasn't so bad, or they might think, living in Reagan's America was a fucking nightmare or something like that, right? But it's not, the two things very clearly, if you look at them analytically, have a very clear difference from each other, right? A world run by Donald Trump, well, we've kind of seen what that was like. Now, a world that is run by Antifa is not going to look like that. You know, it's going to look 1,000 times worse.
Well, okay, I'm not going to argue that the Antifa running things would be an absolute fucking disaster. I'm not arguing that at all. Okay, again, I wish I could have done a bit of research and refreshed my thoughts on a lot of this so I could come back with, referenced verifiable points.
Well, you can always guest star again in the future.
Come back, James.
But I'm not going to come out of... I mean, the discussion went here, but it's not like I'm going to show up to the gaming podcast specifically to talk politics either. I mean, how many people are still watching us? It is just us three just doing this for our own entertainment at this point.
There's 30,
we got 36 live people right now, but we get a lot of views after him too. So
yeah, it's I just
we usually stick to talking about the politics of the gaming hobby, but once in a while we go here and we are. A lot of people that are still interested in looking at this, If you're looking at the comments on the live chat, there's clearly some people that are quite interested. Vision Storm says, I don't entirely disagree with Raggi because I don't trust Republicans, but Democrats are objectively worse at this point.
Well, at this point.
How I feel.
I mean, boy, I just see some of the... and again, I don't know who's in charge of the Republican caucus right now, but there's some real fucking idiots in Republican government, and I guess they get pushed to the forefront. These people doing their Christmas cards or Christmas photos with all the guns and everything, and it's like, it's stupid. They're doing it, as political posturing.
Well, that's silly but insignificant, right? But the policy people on the left, I mean, Emery Calamain points out the FBI is going after parents for yelling at a school board, right? I mean, that is more insane than Lauren Boebert having her family photo with everyone holding an AR-15, like it's and one of them has a much more real effect on American society than the other.
Oh boy, you say that, but I know Republican, like creationism in schools is an easy example of stuff that was attempted, and certainly the left is more successful in getting their shit through schools, I think, than Republicans. But just the idea that creationism should be taught, and that was an actual political point for Republicans. Again, yes, in the past, but
no, I totally agree
that's
with
strange. You can say that evangelicals are a shrinking part of the Republican coalition, but it's people that are on board with that stuff are still in significant positions, and just as the Democrats will bend to their more extreme wing, so would the Republicans in creating that coalition that would get them back on top. There would be concessions to the nutcases, and
I see it, James. I lived in North Carolina a little bit, like in the 90s, and there was in some states there was kind of creationism. I think in Texas too, where it was kind of pushed into the curriculum. But I think you would agree with me that a lot of this critical race theory, equity, diversity, and inclusion shit borders on the religious, and it is in every school board in every fucking state. It's not just your ass backwards,
it's in Texas.
Republican, whatever. Every fucking state has got this now, man. In America, every single one, and in some states it's insane. Like where I am, where, oh God, I don't even want to get into it, but it's pretty bad. Some states it's not as bad, but I mean, literally every single state has got this. And to me, it's the equivalent of creationism, but now it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's complete with original sin, right? The original sin of whiteness.
Right, exactly.
Dolly Pop, who is always on point, and it would have been amazing if she'd been on the panel right now. The conversation would have been great. She says, "Hell yes, that is the America I'd want to live in. Do whatever the hell you want as long as it doesn't take someone else's freedom." I mean, that's the dream, right? That's what I would like. I think it's where me and James would probably agree on that, right?
All of us would.
That would be the ideal. The problem is, you have to also deal in pragmatic realities, and the question of how to deal with them is where things get trickier.
I didn't decide to become a tabletop role-playing publisher because I am really good at or that interested in practical realities, honestly.
Well, yeah, I guess you got a point there. What we got here?
Should probably wind down pretty soon. We're going on 2
I think
hours
so.
and 30 minutes. This is probably our longest episode ever.
But
It doesn't touch a Lamentations stream. Like, I think the shortest one of those is 4 hours and 20 minutes.
Lord
look what I did.
Mateus
I
says-
extended this one.
Lord Mateus says, James' takeaway from this entire conversation, I'm glad I moved to Finland.
Yeah, well, it's no shit. I mean, as soon as I got here, news from the United States sounded very Mad Max, and that's more and more true as time goes on. It's all fucked.
Yeah, let me tell you, I'm so happy that I've done these. Especially, I've been happy about it for a long time, but especially these last 2 years, I'm incredibly happy that I live in Uruguay and not anywhere in North America or
I want to get the hell
Europe.
out.
The land of freedom. Here, the motto in Uruguay is liberty or death. Except that here, unlike in the United States, apparently they mean it. It's great.
All right, so to the chat, any last minute questions? You better get them in right now. We're going to wrap it up pretty soon.
That's right. Well, it's been a pleasure having James here. We hope that he'll come again next time, and I know at that point we'll end up debating. What are we going to end up debating?
Oh,
we're going to end up debating environmentalism. We didn't even touch on that one. There you go. No, we'll hopefully have you on again sometime, and I'm sure you've livened up the chat tonight, and you livened up the meeting. So we're glad that you agreed to come on, and that you didn't get scared off by characters like ourselves.
Well, I published one of you in the current release cycle, so that would be that would be silly to suddenly be scared to be on the same show as him.
Yeah, the last show we were on together, James, was I think Drink Spin Run in
Oh God,
2016 or something. That was pretty bad.
You just got fucking wasted on that one.
Nobody look up that episode, please.
Someone said this is the longest Unappropriate Characters ever. I'm not sure. It might be. Yeah, it's up there for sure. All right, I think that we're probably done here for tonight.
I think so.
Again, it's been a pleasure having you, James, and everybody else. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, share the videos anywhere you think people will find it interesting or get pissed off by it. Make sure everyone knows that James Raggi has been on camera with the evil Venger Satanis and RPG Pundit. And that he believes that Voulez-Vous was the heaviest album of all time. Let's not forget that. And well, check us out. Our next show, assuming that all goes as planned, will be on the 16th of January. So check back with us then. And in the meantime, check out my channel, check out Venger's channel. I don't think Job has a channel.
No.
Check out all of our products. And if you want to give us some extra support in Inappropriate Characters and help Venger to stay up an extra 15 minutes, then be sure to support us on Patreon.
All right, hang out
I guess
a
that's it
second,
for
James,
tonight.
while we shut the stream down.
You okay?
We'll see y'all later.
Thanks, everybody.